Fisheye lenses are iconic in underwater photography, and the Canon 7-14mm fisheye is carrying on that legacy. Let me show you how to put it together in a DLM system with its port options, as well as a DL system and its port options. If you have the DL system, jump to this moment in time, otherwise stick around. When it comes to the DLM system, we have two different port options. We have a smaller compact zoom dome port, which will allow you to zoom the lens through its zoom range, and it provides a smaller footprint, making it a little bit more maneuverable in the water. Alternatively, we have a full large 8-inch dome port that does not allow you to zoom the lens, but it will help you split that water line. I typically personally will dive with both. I'll take both ports. If I need to do a quote unquote regular dive, I can use the smaller compact dome port. But if I find myself really wanting to do over-under shots, I'm going to go ahead and put on the large dome port. Because the large dome port doesn't utilize the gear sleeve, and it has a lot of the same features in assembly, we can go ahead and set it aside, and everything you learn here can be applied to that particular port option. Now, before we get into the assembly of this, I do want to make note of one thing. You can either rear load this system or you can front load it. And what I mean by that is we can have the camera and lens assembled together, and we can put that in and take it out from the back of the housing. This is useful if you find yourself, let's say, going on a day trip to do topside photography. You want to take your camera and lens out, go shoot, come back, drop it back into your housing and go diving again. Alternatively, you may want to do a front-loading type assembly if you find yourself switching between this 7-14 fisheye and, let's say, a macro setup. That way you can leave your camera in the housing and then just take the port off and swap lenses around. So let's start here by showing you all the components needed and how to put them together. First things first, we don't need the cap on the lens, and you definitely don't want to have the hood attached to the lens. This is going to interfere with the port system. You don't want that preventing anything hitting the inside of the port. You'll also notice on this lens you have a limit switch. If you find yourself using a crop sensor, what this is going to do is it's going to limit the range that allows you to zoom the lens, in this case just under 9 to 14. That prevents you from accidentally zooming to a wider field of view and seeing the black corners that will be produced by the lens itself. This is a personal preference thing. There's nothing that says you have to add that limit. As a matter of fact, if you want to take the limit switch and turn it off, it'll allow you to get a slightly wider field of view left to right, but you will have to rely on cropping or some sort of content-aware fill in the post-editing process. So to walk through a front-loading system here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the gear sleeve that you see here. You'll see the gear teeth. Those are going to basically sit inside this port opening here. Drop that down into place like so. Now I can remove the body cap off of the camera, remove the back cap from the lens. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky and needs some finesse. Because you have these two bump outs on the lens itself that allow you to put a filter in, you kind of have to make sure that those bump outs are going to dodge the 5 pads that are on the inside diameter of that gear sleeve. So go ahead, make note of where the red dot is on the lens, obviously the red dot on top of the camera at the noon position, and guide that in past those pads. And then you'll feel those pads engaging with the lens itself as they make a friction fit around the zoom ring of the lens. And then from here, you're going to want to feel for the camera body and then simply bayonet the lens onto the body. Now you can check that when you zoom the gear sleeve, it's going to zoom the lens itself. This is the zoom dome port, and this drive gear is going to engage with that gear sleeve, allowing you to zoom your lens when you're underwater. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and loosen the thumb screws so that they're not protruding to the inside diameter of the port itself. And we're going to use a little bit of Ikelite lubricant. We're going to take that, we're going to check our sealing surface on the inside diameter here where the O-ring makes contact. And we're going to put a little bit of that lube around the O-ring of the housing itself. And we're going to check, not only are we going to apply lubricant to that O-ring, we're going to check for anything that might affect the seal. Take your zoom dome port. You can pull the drive gear out just a little bit. I like to take the drive gear where you put it around here won't affect anything. I like to put it on my left hand side. That allows me to zoom the lens while pulling the trigger with my right hand. Align the port onto the front of the housing and then press down until it seats evenly all the way around that circumference. And then now you can push in on the drive gear and you'll notice it makes engagement with that gear sleeve. Make sure you have all 3 of those thumb screws tightened down before you move on to the next step. These thumb screws don't make the seal, they just prevent the port from being pulled off. So finger tight is perfectly fine for those. Now, you've got the port onto the front of the housing, you're good to go. Depending on your shooting style, if you find yourself always at 15mm, you can get away with leaving the shade on. Otherwise, as you zoom back towards 9 or 7, depending on whether or not you have the limit switch turned on, you are going to catch that in the field of view. So if that's an issue, all you have to do is remove that shade. And to do that, you're going to take the Allen key that was included, and all you have to do is loosen the 3 set screws on the shade itself. Once you have all 3 of those set screws backed out, then you can simply remove the shade from the dome port. Here's the tip that I do sometimes myself. If I find myself going in and out of the water and I want to set the housing down on its face, I'll leave these 3 set screws backed out, and that allows me to take the entire rig down into the shade, and it provides me with a base to open up the housing. For example, if I want to remove the camera and the lens together in that backloading situation, all I have to do is release the lock and open up each of the side locking mechanism for the back, take my back set aside, move my AF on control up and out of the way, check that I don't have any other controls that are going to interfere as I remove that system. And then as I pull the camera and lens out together, you'll feel the friction of the lens and the gear sleeve. And then you just simply keep pulling out, remove your hot shoe. And now I can go shoot my camera. I'll even leave the camera mount because I have a 1/4-20 tripod mount on the bottom of my camera mount here. I can go shoot topside, and when I'm done doing that, all I gotta do is drop it back into the housing and I can go diving again. Welcome to the DL section of this video. Now you have 2 different port choices for this lens. You have the compact 8-inch dome port and you have the full 8-inch dome port. The smaller one is going to be more maneuverable, while the big one, its surface area is going to let you do over-unders a lot more effectively. You can choose between those 2, or if you're somebody like me, I'm going to go ahead and travel with both. That way, if I'm doing a regular dive, I can use the compact dome port, or I can switch over to the full 8-inch dome port and shoot over-unders, which is always a crowd pleaser. Now, no matter which port you choose, the gear sleeve assembly here is going to be the same. It's going to involve a friction fit gear sleeve and obviously the 7-14mm fisheye lens. Now, in this particular scenario, we can do this again one of 2 ways. We can do what we call rear loading, which means that the camera and the lens are already assembled and the entire assembly goes into the housing as one unit, which is nice. Let's say you have your port already assembled and you're going to go do some shooting topside. That way you can take your camera and lens out, go shoot topside, come back, drop it in, and go diving again. The other way doing is what we call front loading, and this is beneficial if you find yourself switching between, let's say you're going to shoot the 100mm macro in the scenario, which would be a very popular choice, and you want to take the port off, change the lens, and put a different port on, and that allows you to front load this lens, leaving the camera body in place. So let me show you how to do that, and we'll go through that process. Okay, so both these dome ports are going to be the same assembly process. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on the compact dome port here and set the bigger dome port aside. I already have the camera body pre-installed into this housing. So what you're going to want to do here is take your housing, turn over here. We're going to take the included tool. It's going to remove the zoom gear retainer. Simply unthread that out of place, which will allow you to remove the dust cap that you can keep with your spare parts. In its place, we're going to take the gear sleeve with the teeth facing the camera body, drop that down into place like that, and take your zoom gear retainer that goes around that gear sleeve. Use the tool, tighten it back up. Again, loosely fit. You don't need to over tighten this. This keeps it in place. Now what we can do is turn our attention to the lens. Obviously, we're not going to need the lens cap. And you're going to want to make sure you remove the hood, otherwise that's going to interfere with the port system. Keep that with your parts as well. And the back cap. In this particular case, I'm going to be shooting the R6 Mark III. That's a full frame, and therefore I'm going to make sure I do not have the limit switch so that I can use the full range of the lens. If I set it to be limited, it will stop just under 9 to 14. But again, with the full frame, I'm going to let it go all the way to 7. Now what I can do is I can remove the body cap off of the camera. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this lens. I have these two ears here to let me put a filter in the side here. And then of course I have the indexing line that's going to correspond to the line on the front of the camera body. When you're doing a front load, you want to make sure that those two ears aren't going to interfere with one of the 5 or 2 of the 5 pads on the gear sleeve. So to do that, just roughly make note of where that line is and then insert your lens down through the gear sleeve. You'll feel those pads make engagement with the ring on the lens. Once you do, push it the rest of the way down, and then you can feel the bayonet onto the camera body. We can check that, we can zoom the lens, make note that it's zooming, and from there we're able to put the port onto. I have the extension and the port pre-assembled here. To do that, you're going to want to make sure that the thumb screws are backed out all the way. You're going to want to check corresponding sealing surfaces and apply some of the included Ikelite lubricant to the O-ring and the sealing surface when you put those together. Same thing when you put that assembly onto the front of the housing. Make sure that the 3 thumb screws are backed all the way out and that you've checked for anything that could affect the seal while applying a little bit of lubricant, and the same thing on that vertical wall there. Now, you'll notice in this particular scenario, I have 3 thumb screws. Only one of those 3 is going to correspond to the shade at the top of the housing. Go ahead and align that thumb screw with the top of the housing. You'll notice that the thumb screws do correspond to pockets in the port mount of the housing. And when we press all the way down, make sure that it's even all the way around that circumference so that when you tighten those thumb screws, they go into those pockets. Now the seal occurred when those 2 pieces went together. The retaining thumb screws are doing just that. They're retaining it, keeping the port from being pulled off. So no need to over tighten it. It's not going to make a better seal. Now we have the port installed. Everything's ready to go. Now that we have the dome port and the gear assembly installed, you will notice that if you leave the shade on, it will show up in the field of view. This is a very wide angle lens. So if you decide that that's going to be an issue, you can go ahead and use the included Allen key that came with the system and loosen the 3 set screws in the side of the shade itself. Once those are loosened, it will allow you to remove that shade, but be very careful here. Here's where it gets a little bit more vulnerable. Once you get everything put together, I recommend putting the port cover back on, especially if you find yourself on a cramped boat. Your fellow divers are going to be probably the most likely usual suspect of scratching your dome port, so keep that protected. One tip I can offer is that when you do come back and you're unloading your system or want to set it down in its face, you can use the shade itself and it will still allow it to act as a platform so that you can set your system down into the shade, allowing you to get to the back. So that's just something worth noting, keeping that obviously with your parts. And then when you get back, we talked about doing a front loading system, but here's what it looks like to remove the camera with the lens installed. On the DL system, go ahead and unlock and lift each locking lid snap, and then up and over the hook, allowing you to set your back to the side. You'll check to make sure your controls are out of the way so that they don't interfere with the camera as you slide it out. In this particular scenario, just pull on the camera. You'll notice you'll feel the friction of the gear sleeve pulling on the lens. And then once you get free of that friction, you can remove your USB-C, your hot shoe, and then you can take your camera to do some topside shooting. Go do some shooting, come back, reverse that installation procedure, and then you can go back and go diving. If you have any questions about this installation procedure, please drop us a comment down below, or feel free to shoot us an email to ikelite@ikelite.com.